Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is December 7th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. And if you're not a calendar watcher, you won't know what today is. Something happened 35 years ago around this day that we laid my twin sister to rest after she passed away in a car accident on November 29th. And also, this is the 76th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack. And this... There's some facts I just want to point out to you about what went on there. Breaking down the numbers, there was 353 Japanese aircraft. There was 400 torpedo planes, 103 level bombers, 131 dive bombers, 79 bombers, 4 heavy carriers. 2,403 U.S. personnel were killed, including 68 civilians. 19 ships destroyed and damaged. 3 aircraft carriers were not in the harbor and were spared. 29 Japanese aircraft were destroyed. 5 Japanese small submarines destroyed. 129 Japanese military members killed and 1 Japanese soldier taken prisoner. And that all happened on December 7th, 1941. And it was a surprise attack. And you can go to your conspiracy theories, whatever you want about that if you want. But it was still an attack on sovereign American soil. And it was pretty devastating to the Pacific Fleet for quite a while. So in honor of that event, I would like to play taps for you. That was echoing taps, and still puts a frog in my throat, and you're kind of emotional because they played echoing taps at my sister's funeral. She was in the military. She was buried with full military honors. My sister was, her body was flown up from Dallas-Fort Worth Naval Air Station, and the commander of that station flew up on honor guard, and friends of hers, my sister at the Naval Air Station, to attend the funeral. And out of all the things I've ever had to do in my life, that was the hardest so far. In my 55 years of life, that was the hardest thing I ever had to do, was say goodbye to my sister, my twin sister. And I know the folks who lost loved ones over in Pearl Harbor back in 1941, it had to be just as devastating for them to say goodbye forever for their loved ones that perished in the attack on Pearl Harbor. So we're celebrating the 76th year of that, and hopefully that type of atrocity will never happen again. You know, that would be my ardent hope and prayer for that. All right, today we are... Danny Boy's probably going to get a little bit of trouble for this one today, because I am, this is something I've been trying to read up on and try to think about for quite a while. And This is, I saw Steven Crowder over to Louder with Crowder show. It's a YouTube. He's also on CRTV. He's been doing these Change My Mind videos. The first one he did was on the Second Amendment, and then he did one on free speech. And now he's doing one on Real Conversations. There are only two genders, and that's his position. And he invites college students to come and change his mind. And for the most part, the video was very good. They were very cordial, except for Monica, the second person that was there. And now I'm probably going to misidentify her, but she looks female to me, so I'm going to call Monica her. Monica's a female name, and you know, as far as biologically, she looks to be female. Okay, and in the video, she talks about that actually being a she talks about that being a form of violence if we mispronounce somebody. And the whole time she was sitting there discussing it with, and mainly it was a one-sided discussion because she kept cutting Stephen off. She wouldn't answer his questions. She was very evasive on certain things. And for the most part, if you want to watch this video, I'll have the link up at the show notes page. But if you want to watch this video, I can't show it to you here. It's 50 minutes long. But it's a good video to watch. I do caution some strong profane language at the end by not Stephen Crowder, but by one of the ladies who didn't agree with his position. And she was very vulgar and profane in what she said to Stephen Crowder. So, you know, I thought that was very hypocritical of the tolerant transgender or left community. So we're going to talk today, and I've titled the show, Objective Standards. Objective Standards define gender, not feelings. Objective standards define gender, not feelings. And the whole time this Monica was talking on this video, everything she was talking about was subjective. And we're going to talk and discuss a little bit about objective and subjective standards and how you actually build societies. And with the whole LGBTQ community, everything's subjective. Matter of fact, this Monica kept talking about, and we've talked about this on the show, we don't govern, or we don't set standards of morality or standards of anything on the outliers in society. It's whatever standard is. You know, he was even trying to pin her down on what society's actually taught. You know, that a normal standard human being is born with, you know, 8 fingers, 2 thumbs, 10 toes. You know, and they go through this whole test when you're born, when a baby's born, to check everything out. You know, they have this little standardized checklist that they have to check off. And that's the standard. It's an objective standard. You can look and the by just 99.99% of America are standard with the 10 fingers, 10 toes, and everything else. And Steve Crowder brought out on there there's a condition where you're born with both sets of organs. And but that's only represents, like I think he said it was 0.0008% of the population. It's almost statistically not there, but it's there. But do we govern on that? Can we actually build an objective standard for society upon that? And this has been the question. And this goes back to my argument against humanism and all its manifestations, whether you're talking about the ethical humanist movement or the ethical movement, that's part of humanism. Atheism is part of humanism. Anything that deviates from an objective standard is part of humanism. Evolution is part of humanism. This whole idea that there is no objective standard, you know, that there's no objective standard for morality. You know, it's whatever we think or whatever we feel, you know, the dog eat dog type world out there. Now, they'll argue that they do have objective standards, but when you get right down to it, they really don't. When you get right down to the nuts and bolts of their argument, when you say, and you actually can bring scientific proof that that intelligent design was and still is at work in the world today, they go to a subjective standard to try to disprove you. They don't actually use science, because the science they use is circularly in logic. It's circular logic that they use. And the best one, Ben Stein, he put out a documentary about intelligent design. It's oh, I can't remember, but let me make a note of that, Ben Stein. And maybe my buddy Dave, if he's listening, he might know right off the top of his head. Is it No Intelligence Allowed or something like that? And he did a really masterful job about this, and actually showing how those that are looking into, like the ICR, the Institute for Creation Research, Ken Ham's Answer in Genesis, how these, especially the ICR, the Institute for Creation Research, they're looking from a scientific standpoint, did creation happen? Was intelligent design, did intelligent design, did it create the heavens and the earth? And they're using the scientific method to research this. And yes, it can be done. And the same way that scientists who believe in evolution are using the scientific method to try to prove that evolution was what caused life on earth and everything we see around here. But there's one big difference between the two. One big difference. The creation story has never varied. Has never varied. If you count back a calendar, you can figure out how old the earth is. All the evidence so far that these creation scientists have looked at point to a young earth. Everything you see down to the cellular level speaks of intelligent design. There's no way that it could have just by accident happened, according to the scientific method. Now, in evolution, they keep moving the goalposts. When I was a kid, they were talking, about millions of years, to account for the dinosaurs and stuff like that. And the older I get, the further back in time they move the goalpost to explain evolution. Well, it took a longer time. And it just, probably by the time the next generation has grandchildren, they'll probably have it back, the age of the universe, back to trillions of years to try to explain and prove evolution, when you have the other side of the story that they've never changed the goalposts. They've never changed the goalpost and have researched back to that. Now, I'm going to have a lot of people that disagree with me on that. I've had people in the past disagree with me on this, and that's okay. But the arguments they use to disprove what I'm saying, and the biggest one, the funniest one I thought, and this is a little side note here, one of the examples I've always used in lessons and stuff like that, you take the molecular components to make a watch. Just a simple mechanical pocket watch, nothing electronic like, my wristwatch today. We're talking about just an old-fashioned wind-up pocket watch. Put them in a shoebox. Tape it up so it can't get out. How many times would you have to shake that box in order for it to appear? You cannot calculate the number. It is not comprehensible, the number of times you'd have to shake that box if it would ever, at the last shake that you do, open the box and there is a fully functioning pocket watch. It just can't be done. And the arguments, there's 3 or 4. I had to read through to understand what they were trying to say, but their logic was so circular. They were trying to disprove my theory that how many times you shake that shoebox, shake a shoebox, shake a shoebox. So they use, evolutionists, in my opinion, use very subjective standards to try to prove evolution. And they accuse creation scientists who are looking to see if what, intelligent designer or God's creation, creative force, created the heavens and the earth. And they use very objective standards, scientific standards, to try to prove that. And yet they're belittled, they're berated, and everything like that. In the same way with, we're going to talk about gender, transgender, not news, but just the terrorism. And I have been labeled in the past transphobic, homophobic, Islamophobic. And my response to these people, they don't even know what a phobia is. So they're using these words, in my opinion, don't even exist in the English language because, you know, they're using, for the most part, you know, for the masses, they're using the term phobia incorrectly, you know. And so you can call me whatever you want, except for late for dinner. Call me late for dinner, we're going to have an issue. But I just want to bring this up to talk about this because this is something that's been in the news. It's something that, you know, yesterday or day before yesterday, we had the cake maker at the Supreme Court. I read an article last night about some of the questions that were being asked by the justices, and they're by no means all the questions. And you know, and I don't know if we're going to get a transcript of that anytime soon, but there were some huge questions that were not answered by the folks that were like the UCLA or the not UCLA, ACLU lawyer for Colorado and stuff like that, that they just could not answer. You know, and there's a definite bias. Some of those questions, there was an actual definite bias going on there because there was some investigations going, you know, that they have done that. They went to these other cake makers and they would refuse to make these cakes. They'd sell them pastries and stuff. They just refused to make those cakes for them. And so there was a actual double standard that was going on in Colorado at the time. And so, you know, we have that in news, and that's huge. I mean, depending on which way it comes down. Hopefully they come down on the side. I think the right reading of all this would be, they should come down on the side of the cake baker. Free expression, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And that's where it should be. You know, so we have that. And again, like I said, this Steven Crowder video that he did. And I think Steve does a very good job. He's he doesn't get upset with the folks. He doesn't yell at them or anything. He does a better job than I could probably do. Because that would get my dander up if someone would not answer my questions. You know, and there was other people that, you know, he had a chair that they could sit down and talk, and they wouldn't do it. They wanted to talk over him, you know, to this lady, and they were getting upset because he wouldn't let them do it. Because he says, I don't consent to that. I have the format set up here. I have permits to be here. I was invited to be here by the Young Republicans at that campus. And he actually had some security guys on the edge of the crowd there. And these people were just, you know, because he didn't consent to them doing that, they were getting upset that they couldn't chime in anytime they wanted. You know, because he's having a one-on-one conversation with one person trying to change his mind. And again, you know, someone said out there, well, you're squelching my free speech. And now, I'm glad he didn't address that because that was an idiotic statement. He was not surprised. They were still able to be heard. Just that he had a format set up that he was adhering to. And it was only fair to the people who actually got in line to sit down and talk with him that went on. And so this has been something that's it's been heavy on my mind. You know, it's something. It's not that I didn't want to do it. It's like why should I have to? Because we don't. Our society, our laws, our morality is based on objective standards. A stop sign is a stop sign. Every time you come up to it, it means stop, and that's an objective standard. Now, if we had applied a subjective standard to that stop sign, some days it might mean yield. Other days it might mean stop. And you'd have to keep track of that. One time of the day it means yield. Other times of the day it means stop. Very subjective because it doesn't mean the same thing all the time. So I know I'm being simplistic on this, but that's an example of an objective standard. Another objective standard is murdering somebody is bad and is punishable by law. That's an objective standard. There's nothing subjective about it. The only subjective thing about it is what you're going to charge the person with, depending on if it's premeditated or if it was an accident you know, like you were defending yourself and somebody else got shot and killed or hurt or whatever. You know, there's a whole range of things in there. But if we just go back to premeditated murder, which is what one of the 10 Commandments talks about, thou shalt not kill, that's premeditated murder. There's an objective standard there that says that's wrong and you will be punished and be held accountable for that. And your life can be taken away either by the death penalty or life in prison, period. So there are objective standards. When somebody falls off a 40-foot ladder, they're not breaking the law of gravity. They are proving the law of gravity. That is an objective standard. If you fall off a ladder, you're going to fall to the ground or on another building. You know what I mean? If you're on the side of a house and the ground's below you, you fall off your ladder, gravity's going to take you to the ground. That's an objective standard that we can look at and say every time that happens, the person lands on the ground. They don't stop in midair, you know, turn sideways and step on the ground. We don't have tractor beams yet. We don't have any way to manipulate gravity yet. Maybe someday we would, but the principle still stands even if you could arrest somebody halfway down. They were falling towards the ground. Gravity makes people do that. You know, and without any other type of intervention, you're going to end up on the ground. That's an objective standard. You know, another objective standard, people need air to breathe in order to stay alive. That's just, to me, that's an objective standard. And where the rubber meets the road here is the transgender people who support transgenderism, they are not using objective standards. And we'll get into that a little bit more here. I got a couple things I want to talk about in that, like definition of transgender. I have a letter about gender identity is not subjective, and it isn't. It isn't. Objective standards define gender, not feelings. It's not how, you know, there are days, especially back when I was working real hard or out there splitting wood or something like that, that I came in the house and I tell my wife, man, I feel like I've been rode hard and put up wet, and that was a reference to a horse. Now, just because I felt like that, does that mean I'm a horse? No. No, it doesn't mean I'm a horse. I was using, call it whatever you want, an analogy, euphemism, whatever. It's an analogy to me. Maybe I'm not using the exact correct word there, but I was trying to convey an idea that, you know, a horse who's rode hard and put up wet is lathery, sweaty, sore. You have to rub them down, you know, get them cleaned up and stuff like that so they feel better. And that's what the idea I was trying to convey. Or, you know, when you tell somebody I'm sicker than a dog, well, you tell them that you're a dog, you know, or you're sick as a dog, or I feel like, you know, whatever, you know, your feelings are very, very subjective depending on how you feel. And with transgenderism, it's the same thing. You know, these folks that want to identify something that their biological sex, and as far as I'm concerned, nobody's brought up a good argument yet to tell me that gender doesn't have anything to do with your biological sex. Because your biological sex is objective. You can tell medically, scientifically, if someone's a male or female by their chromosomes. That's an objective standard. Now, if you want to go beyond that, then you go into the world of subjectivism. And it's whatever you feel like that day. Well, today I'm non-binary, cis, you know, whatever. And there's some, I think the New York Times put out there's some 90 different genders. 90? That is a subjective list because they're not based on any objective facts. They're not based on science at all. And this is, folks, this is a huge issue in this society, and that's the same way with humanism. A lot of humanism is not based on facts. When a guy like Sam Harris talks about the Bible and talks about suffering and stuff like that, he's not doing it from an objective scientific standard. He's very subjective in the facts he puts forth, and any atheist that talks about pain and suffering is the biggest issue they have with Christians. How can a God allow all this pain and suffering? And my retort back to them, what are you doing about it? What are you doing to alleviate the pain and suffering of folks? That's my standard retort. It may not be the best one, but that's my standard retort to that. What are you doing about it? You know, does God have to do everything? And a lot of times I've asked people that in chat rooms and they won't answer me. They just absolutely will not answer me. What are you doing about it? What are you doing about the pain and suffering? Can't answer it. Can't or won't. Because if they do answer it and they answer it objectively, then they have to answer a lot of other questions in their life objectively. So a lot of their lives, especially humanists, a lot of their lives are very subjective. You know, because situational ethics, very subjective. Whatever the situation dictates. You know, we don't have humanists don't live by a set of principles. You know, because those principles are subject to their feelings, the situation, time of day, day of the week of the month, month of the year. Very subjective. And they don't live by an objective standard. You know, that if someone comes up to you, they're going to know exactly where you stand on issues. And to me, when I interact with folks, I want to know who I'm interacting with. And I want to know, you know, I want to lay, especially like if you're debating or something like that, I want to lay down some objective rules that we have to follow in this debate. You know, they can't be subjective. They can't be, well, I just don't agree with the rules. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to overtalk my debate opponent, and he's just going to have to talk louder than me to get his point out. That's a subjective standard. And so, again, I'm putting a lot of these things out, and I don't want to muddy the water too much, but, you know, I see our society, and I see it crumbling before our eyes if we continue down this road of everything is subjective. You know, that's not how I feel. That's the facts that are put before me, that are absolutely the facts that are put before me. Look, folks, I got a story we'll get to a little bit later here about how the Grinch bot stole Christmas. I think it's funny. Anyway, do you do a lot of shopping online? Well, one of my affiliate marketer partners, gearxs.com, you name it, they probably have it. I haven't searched their whole website, but they have oodles of things on their website, from clothing apparel to camping to outdoor, jewelry, shoes, just all sorts of things on their website there, and at good prices, good, deep discounted prices. So if you like what you hear on the Dan Clemens Show and you want to support the show, please go over to the danclemenshow.com and click on the gearxs.com widget. It'll take you to the website, and I'm telling you, you will not be sorry for going over that website and doing your online shopping. Today's Daily Bible reading comes from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verses 4 through 8. When the word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. Then I said, and this is Jeremiah speaking, then I said, O Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a youth. But the Lord said to me, do not say I am a youth, for you shall go to all to whom I send you, and whatever I command you, you shall speak. Do not be afraid of their faces, for I am with you to deliver you, says the Lord. And the one thing I want to really point out here is in the beginning there, in verse 5. He said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That means that life begins at inception. There's no subjectivity about that phrase whatsoever. I knew you before you were formed in the womb. As soon as conception took place, that's when the spark of life, as it were, came into being in Jeremiah. And God knew him before he was totally formed in the womb. Knew him. Knew who he was. Knew what he was going to do. Sanctified him for the work that God had put before him. Today's quote meal comes from Peter Sinclair. And this is for all the IT folks out there. Your input will determine your output. So guard what you put in, and you won't be put out. The old term garbage in, garbage out works with the brain too, folks. Works with the soul, works with your psyche. If all you ever do is put garbage in, that's all you're ever going to get out is garbage. And I believe too much in the world today is garbage going into people's minds, all the subjective ideology and stuff like that. Okay. The short Bible lesson today is by Wes McAdams over at radicallychristian.com. Now, he posted this back on December 23rd, 2014. Why arguments about Christmas are counterproductive? And I agree with him. Many years ago, I used to argue with folks about the Christmas. And I didn't realize that I should have used that opportunity there's a lot of folks out there that only think about religion a couple times a year, and that's usually on Christmas and Easter. And instead of arguing about their practices, why don't we take the idea that Paul had put forth in one of his letters, talking about whether Christ is preached, on purpose or in pretense, for whatever the reason is, Christ is preached. So these people that are coming and celebrating Christmas and Easter, they're at least recognizing a basic truth that Jesus Christ was born and Jesus Christ died on the cross. I think it's up to us to share that gospel story with them instead of condemning them for their religious practices. We need to share Christ with them. And I think that's, he says a lot about that in the article there. And I think we need to take those opportunities wherever they come to preach Christ and Him crucified to everybody. Now, let me get over here. Here is the objective versus subjective. It's a businessdictionary.com. While it may not seem intuitive, the battle of objective versus subjective decision-making often makes an appearance in investing. Subjective refers to personal perspectives, feelings, or opinions entering the decision-making process. Objective refers to the elimination of subjective perspectives and a process that is purely based on hard facts. Okay, how does this influence investing? And this, folks, and the reason why I use this definition here is because I think it's a very good one that we can apply to our subject matter. What determines gender? Is it nature or nurture? Is it based on objective facts, or is it based on subjective feelings and ideas? Okay, and I think this is very, I don't want to say intuitive, but it's very informative about talking about the investing process, because there are a lot of things that if you think about it, if you do any type of investing, there's a lot of subjective things you can expose yourself to, or you can get right down into the raw numbers and just crunch the numbers and see if what your investment will bring out of it. Okay, so how does this influence investing? Investors should approach investing purely objectively and make their decisions based on hard analysis of the facts. You'd expect an investor to do some due diligence on their investing options, and once they've done simply select the option with the best return, or that best meets their objectives. While that sounds straightforward, it's a lot harder in practice, as investors are influenced by perceptions of companies, both public and their own, as well as simply their gut feel of the company. For some investors, this works well. They pick the winner, that no one else saw coming. For others, they commit to an investment for the wrong reasons and it burns them. Investors also struggle to remain objective once they've made an investment. A stock takes a hit and they dump it in a hurry, or a stock appreciates and they hold on to it even as it declines because they remember the good performance. The goal of investing is to buy low and sell high, and either of the thought processes above defeats the goal. When making investment decisions, it's always important to make sure you think about and consider whether you are letting subjective thoughts work their way into the process. And folks, this is very important, because there are outliers to everything. There are people out there that swear up and down that their investments are just gut feelings and they do well. I have a hard time believing that, because of so much information that we can get, or that maybe we even hear in the periphery of our lives, that go into those gut feelings. I believe those gut feelings, although they're subjective, I think they're based on some objective facts that we might have heard, or we might, we might have put in, or actually put into practice earlier on. But by and large, the objective investors are the ones that make the money. I'm invested, not heavily, but I'm invested in penny stocks. And there are players, day traders in penny stocks. If you own $100,000 in penny stocks, and that goes up 2 pennies, 4 pennies, 6 pennies, 10 pennies, you're going to make a chunk of change. You're not going to get rich, but you're going to make a chunk of change. And in penny stocks, 100,000 shares can start and either climb up or climb down, depending on what you're doing, selling or buying. But you need to do your due diligence in this type of stuff. And I've actually seen some of the penny stocks I'm in. I've actually seen some day traders get burnt pretty bad. This one guy said he had 500,000 in one of the penny stocks that I'm in, and he thought that the stock was going to go higher. And evidently, he said something about I wasn't checking on this for a couple days, and there was some heavy selling going on during that couple days, and it actually went down below what he originally bought the stock for. So that money he had invested in that he couldn't use, and he couldn't use the profits off that because he didn't have any to reinvest in more stocks. So instead of he may have been sick, he didn't say what was going on, but that was his bad. Because he didn't put in his mind an objective fact saying I got to check this stock every day because it's a penny stock and I don't know which way it's going to go on any given day or any given time of the day. You just don't know because penny stocks are so volatile. It's not until they get up above the dollar range where they stop being so volatile, and even then, depending on how high it actually goes in the dollar range, will it start to equalize out and sort of plateau? Okay, but that's the reason why I brought this objective and subjective definition out here about business, because this is something we do every day. This is something we do when we're grocery shopping. Most of our decisions are objective. Well, I'll look at this brand here, and I've had this brand before, and I didn't like the taste of it. And to me, that's an objective observation because I didn't like the taste. Somebody else might like the taste of it. I didn't. For my taste, I know my taste, and that's an objective observation about my taste when I'm choosing something. If I just go in there and just say, well, this one makes me feel better than this one, or, something that you really can't, and even sometimes feelings can be objective as long as you're only using them for yourself and not try to use your feelings to make decisions for somebody else. And that's where this gender argument, this transgender arguments have been coming up. What a lot of people feel about it, they want to quantify in law like they did up in Canada, and it just made a mess of everything with mispronouncing somebody. Because everything, as far as I'm concerned, everything I've seen so far about transgenderism, especially those who support it's very subjective. Oh, mispronouncing me is disrespecting me. Did you? And this is something I know Stephen Crowder probably had in the back of his mind, but he didn't bring it up. But respect is earned. Now, I'll respect you as a human being, as a person. But if we've never had a conversation before, and I go up to you and I accidentally say, not accidentally, but if you look like a woman, and I want to get your attention, I'll say, excuse me, miss. And if the first thing you say when you whip around is, how dare you? I don't identify as a miss. Then you know what? I'm probably just going to walk away from you. And I could have been tapping you on the shoulder and say, hey, miss, there's a bus coming down and you're standing in its way. Now, I'm exaggerating. I'd never do that. But you see what I'm saying? Maybe I had something important to tell this person, and because of the way they reacted to me, and I don't even know them, and what transgender folks in this Monica, what they want is they want us to find out how people want to be addressed. What gender pronouns or what pronouns need to be used. Sorry, I'm not going to do that. I've never started conversations that way. Oh, excuse me, what pronoun should I call you before I start a conversation with you? I'm just not going to do it. and there's and I won't even qualify this other than there is nobody out there big enough to make me. You can beat me within an inch of my life and you still can't make me do that. Sorry. I'm not being disrespectful. I think if someone whips around like that and it gets mad because you mispronouned them, I think they're the ones being disrespectful because they don't know what it means to be in polite society. And that's not being polite in society. You know, and so yeah, there are some transgenders out there that's hard to tell what their sex is because they've already went through, maybe not the full Monty, but they went through hormone treatments, and guys have grown breasts, women have grown facial hair. The biggest thing I look for is the Adam's apple. You can't see it in me because I got a fatter neck, but the skinnier ones you can definitely see if they got an Adam's apple or not. Most women do not have Adam's apples, or pronounced Adam's apple, and that's not a good indicator. But if you dress like a woman, you look like a woman, I'm probably going to address you as a woman until I find out differently. And all you've done is confuse society. That's all you have done. Now, I have let me see here. I didn't get this one up over here because I was looking for a couple other things. Let me get this up on here. This is the sociology of gender, if it comes up eventually. There it goes. This is the sociology of gender. It's by Dr. Let me get down in here. That's the doctor over there on the right-hand side, Dr. Zulika Zavalis, and she's an applied psychologist. I have to really do some research on it. I've never heard that term, applied psychologist. And this is a paper that was put out. This page is a resource explaining general sociological concepts of sex and gender. The examples I cover are focused on experiences of otherness. You're other than a male or female. Okay? And just that, otherness, is very subjective. I hate to break the news to folks, but it is very subjective. And I'm just going to read a couple of the paragraphs here for you. He said, in society, we make a distinction between sex and gender. You make a distinction. I don't think the whole of society does. And this is where it kind of irks me. Folks that think about gender as being fluid and stuff like that, and that, you know, there's 90-some pronouns or 90-some genders and pronouns that go with them. I don't think I personally don't think objectively there's a distinction between sex and gender. I'm a male. I was born a male. I will die a male. I'm a he. Okay? My wife was born a female. She'll die a female. It's a she or a her. And so I can look objectively and say, you're a male. The pronouns, you know, some of the pronouns are he or him. Or his. He, she. You see what I'm saying? It is absolutely based on sexuality or your sex. Sex are the biological traits that societies use to assign people into the category either male or female. Right? Whether it be through a focus on chromosomes, genitalia, or some other physical ascription. When people talk about the difference between men and women, they are often drawing on sex on rigid ideas of biology. Yes, objective standards. That's what they're called. Rather than gender, which is an understanding of how society shapes our understanding of those biological categories. And I'm stopped reading, this is, in my opinion, this is where society is going to get in huge trouble. Because you have an objective standard there, either chromosomes, genitalia, or some other physical ascription. But when we start letting a society shape our understanding of these biological categories, then we get 99 or 90 categories that are very subjective. Gender is more fluid. That means, in other words, I can be a male today, a female tomorrow, non-binary on Sunday, and then go back to male on Monday. At least that's how I understand fluidity. You know, it's very fluid. It may or may not depend upon biological traits. More specifically, it is a concept that describes how societies determine and manage sex categories, the cultural meanings attached to men and women's roles, how individuals understand their identities, including but not limited to being a man, woman, transgender, intersex, genderqueer, and other gender positions. Gender involves social norms, attitudes, and activities that society deems more appropriate for one sex or another. Gender is also determined by what an individual feels and does. Very subjective. And the problem is, and I wonder if they even realize this, because she sort of, and this is what I wanted to really focus in on this paragraph there, understanding their identities include but not limited to being a man, a woman, and then the rest of these have something to do with the basic idea of male and female, transgender, intersex, genderqueer, and other gender positions. Where does it all start from? It starts from the perspective that either you started off as a man or started off as a woman. And you're biologically one or the other. Like I said, the ones that are both, the number is almost statistically insignificant, but they are not. They are real people that have this problem, that have an issue. And I want to say problem, but it's a biological confusion that they actually have. You know, and I feel for them. But for the vast majority of society, we don't have that issue. You know, when I don't want to paint this picture for you, but when I stand in front of the mirror, getting ready to go into the shower, I see a man staring back at me. I don't see anything else. And I imagine my wife says the same thing about herself. And I imagine that most of the American people, or most male and females in the world, understand that understanding that my sex, my biological sex, determines my gender. I am a man. I am a he. My wife is a woman, and she's a she. And this idea that gender can be fluid based on what? What an individual feels or does. Very subjective. So if I choose, and I think I'm right in saying this, if I choose to live in society that has objective standards, and you want to introduce into that subjective standards and tell me that I'm wrong, we're going to have a problem. Because usually I would say almost all the time, you cannot prove something subjectively. Especially when it comes to genders. Now, she goes on down into the article here. The sociology of gender examines how society influences our understandings and perceptions of differences between masculinity, what society deems appropriate behavior for a man, and femininity, what society deems appropriate behavior for a woman. We examine how this in turn influences identity and social practices. We pay special focus on the power relationships that follow from the established gender role in a given society, as well as how this changes over time. Again, you're talking about the standards of masculinity and femininity. I know guys, I know men that I would call them effeminate. Because they're men, they say they're straight, they have wives, they have children, but they act effeminate. Doesn't mean that they're not a man anymore, it's just how they're acting. You know, they're not big and burly. You know, they don't want to go around and wrestle with somebody or fight with somebody or shoot somebody. You know, they're very effeminate. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm not saying anything against him, but that doesn't change the fact that he's still a guy. What one does feel, or what the society, it could change over time. Established gender order in a given society, as well as how this changes over time. And just because women do men's jobs, like one of the young ladies in our congregation, she's going to tech school to become an electrician. You don't see too many female electricians. Doesn't mean that that's wrong for her to go in and be an electrician. Sometimes I think with job roles, I think we do go a little overboard on the whether they're male or female, the gender. But that doesn't matter. If the person, male or female, can do the job, let them do the job. And if you have a problem with a woman being an electrician or welder or diver or something like that, get over yourself. Doesn't mean she's any less of a woman because of what she does. That's a subjective standard. That's a subjective standard. Now we're going to get into just a little bit more here. I'm only going to read one more paragraph out of this about this. I'm not even going to get into the gender queer. I'm just going to get into the cisgender, because this is just another one of these mind-boggling things. Sex and gender does not always align. Cisgender describes people whose biological body they were born into matches their personal gender identity. This experience is distinct from being transgender, which is where one's biological sex does not align with their gender identity. Transgender people will undergo a gender transition that may involve changing their dress and self-presentation, such as a name change. Transgender people may undergo hormone therapy to facilitate this process, but not all transgender people undertake surgery. Intersexuality describes variations on sex definitions related to ambiguous genitalia, gonads, sex organs, chromosomes, or hormones. Transgender and intersexuality are gender categories, not sexualities. Transgender and intersexual people have varied sexual practices, attractions, and identities, as do cisgender people. So, again, a cisgender describes people whose biological body they were born into matches their personal gender identity. Why do we have to make up another term, like cisgender? Or I've heard it called cisnormative. I am the rule, not the exception to the rule. I am the objective rule. I'm a man. My pronouns are he, him, whatever the male pronouns are. My wife is a female, and use whatever the female pronoun. She's not cisgender. Because again, all the things I've read, all the videos I've watched, no one's convinced me, no one's changed my mind that gender has nothing to do with our biological sex. Again, every example that's ever given that I've seen are outliers. They're not the norm. And again, do we govern by the norm, or do we govern by the outliers? When you only have less than 4% of the United States population that identifies as LGBTQ, is that societal norms, or are those outliers? Well, those would be outliers. It's not to take anything away from them or diminish anything that they do or anything like that. It's just that's what it is. They're outliers. And to change the society's perceptions of those outliers to where everybody else who is normal, biologically, objectively normal, is ridiculous. And what you're going to do is you're going to destroy that society. And again, I keep going back to the humanists. And the humanist agenda and the humanist movement is, for the most part, is based on subjectivity, not objectivity. And I think this is doing great harm to our country. I think this is doing great harm to children. There's children as young as 6 years old that are being put on hormones because they don't, a little boy identifies as a girl, a little girl identifies as a boy. So the parents are like, instead of sitting down talking to them, and saying this is just a phase you're going through, you're a little boy, and handle it that way, which people in the transgender community would say that's a violence against the child. as far as I'm concerned, children are confused enough without you putting your subjective confusion on them too. And what happens if they get older and they went through this hormone therapy that stunted their puberty and everything, and they decide that no, I'm not a girl, I'm actually a little boy, and the damage has already been done. But when you ask that question, they just look at you like a deer caught in the headlights. They're like, so what? Gender's fluid. That's the answer. Gender's fluid. Well, then you come up with these issues like this. And then why, and this is the issue that I think is very troubling, in the transgender community, why is the suicide rate 44%? And I think one of the reasons, and I like I said, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist or anything, but I think one of the reasons is people commit suicide because they're confused. I had a baby brother that committed suicide. He was on some very strong drugs. And he was confused about some things in his life. And the drugs he was on added to his confusion. And so rather than deal with the confusion and everything that was like ruling his life, he ended it. He just ended it. So again, when we, like I said, this is something that I have a hard time talking about, but I think the conversation needs to be had. I think we need to settle on, at least I do, I need to know that a stop sign is a stop sign every day of the week, every minute of the day. Stop signs are not fluid. You know, stop sign is a stop sign. And I need to know that a male, a biological male, is a he. That the biology informs the gender, not the other way around. Or what you think your gender is doesn't inform your biology. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. And if we continue to go down this road and everything is subjective, it's just like the economy, net neutrality, the Constitution. I'm a constitutional conservative. I look at things objectively. I think there's an objective standard for the federal government in the Constitution. I think there are 28 enumerated powers, and that's it. And if the federal government goes beyond that, they're unconstitutional, need to be reined back in. That's an objective standard. And if we don't have a society based on objective standards, we don't have a society. Being a country, we have borders. States have borders. Cities have borders. Why can't the country have borders too? There's a lot of people out there who don't believe in that. Why can't we secure our borders? What's wrong with securing our borders to make sure we know who's coming in? We don't care. Honestly, we don't care if people leave. I've never seen anybody come up with a story about, oh, I was never allowed to leave the United States unless they didn't have a passport to go to another country. But we're not like the Soviet Union where we built a wall to keep everybody in. Standard. That's an objective standard. And folks, you just, again, if we don't have objective standards in which the society can live by, that you can step out of your door and know if you're breaking the law or not, then we don't have a society at all. Canada is a perfect example. I believe that law is C-16 or something like that. Jordan Peterson talks about it, and other ones about, you know, it's hate speech to mispronounce somebody. It's an aggression against them. And you could, you know, get fined or face jail time up in Canada for that. And it's very subjective. You don't know when you're breaking the law or not. Hello, 1984. You know, George Orwell predicted this in his book. I think you need to move it from fiction to nonfiction in the libraries now. If we don't have objective standards in a car, in America anyway, and even over in when I was driving over in Scotland, the gas pedal was, even though the steering wheel was on the right side of the car, the gas pedal, the brake, and the clutch were still in the same order. It's just the steering wheel was on the wrong side of the car, and you had to shift if it was. We had a Renault, a 5-speed on the tree Renault, and you had to do your shifting with your left hand. To me, that wasn't too hard because I was used to shifting with my right hand, and I just, I had to remember I was shifting with my left hand. It didn't take long to get that up, but thank God the brake pedals and the gas pedal and the clutch pedals were the same. But if there's not an objective standard for automobile manufacturers to go through, you could have Ford putting the brake pedal where the accelerator is and the accelerator where the brake pedal. We'll just stick with the automatics right now. If you add a clutch in there, you could really throw people off. And if you go to a Chevy, it's totally different. So there's standards. There's industry standards. They're objective. They're objective. Any signage out there, stop sign, yield sign, anything like that, there are objective standards to that. And if we don't have objective standards in which we can live by, then we won't have a society. It'll be in chaos. It'll be in tatters. Like I said, getting back to the economy. There are, what most people deal with today is based on Keynesian. John Maynard Keynes was an English economist who sort of followed in the footsteps of Marx, but didn't go quite as far as Marx. But the damage is still about the same, that he put all the faith in government to control the economy over the people. And too many people today, they don't see the error in this. And there is objective truths that you can point to say Keynesian economics was why we're $20 trillion in debt now. But when you bring it up to a lot of people, they've lived with that subjective truth for so long, they don't know what the truth is anymore. And when you bring up that government should get out of the economy and should let the free markets rule, then you're called an idiot and a liar, even though you can prove that people use free market principles every day when they go out shopping. I don't want to get into that again. Those are objective facts. Those are objective standards. And I don't know why people accept objective standards in one part of their life and just throw them away when it comes to another part of their life. Either we live our lives objectively or we live them subjectively. If we live in both ways, then I tell you that you're living your life subjectively, especially when it comes to societal standards. Now, if it's your personal life and you want to do things, in your personal life that doesn't affect the society, that's very subjective, you have at it. You're an individual, you can make that choice. But when you, especially this Monica and this Steven Crowder, and on these people that support transgenderism and support the idea of transgenderism, when you start using those subjective values and quantifying them into law, that's when society breaks down. I'm sorry to tell you, that's when society breaks down. Because it's very, very subjective. You don't know from one minute to the next whether you're breaking the law or not. Because it's subjective. And even if you don't mean to be disrespectful to somebody, then subjectively they say, well, you didn't use my right pronouns. You didn't even ask what pronouns. Well, I didn't even ask what gender you were. Don't really care. If I look at you and see, honestly, I don't care if you went through the transition or not. If I look at you and see that you're a female, I'm going to call you a female. If you're a female and you identify as a man, that's on you, not me. Wear a sign. I identify as a man. Use masculine pronouns. Get little patches made up. I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but if you want people to know your subjective values, you need to put them out there. So people know. Okay? A couple more stories here. I got to get to this one. I thought this one was funny. Are Grinch bots stealing Christmas? And I do have, I have a video I want to share with you real quick here. This is from Q13 Fox up in Seattle. And I just want to play this for you, and then I want to talk a little bit about the economics behind this. So let me get this going here.
Grinch that stole Christmas, right? Well, the 2017 version is a cyberbot that purchases toys before you even finish typing your payment information.
Clearly, retailers and manufacturers are entitled to earn a fair profit for their toys and other products, but we don't need predatory middlemen who are inflating the prices just to line their own pockets.
One of the hottest toys this year is the Nintendo Switch. Now, one Q13 viewer from Ballard says on Twitter that she went on a wild goose chase to every Target in the area looking for a Nintendo Switch. She finally found one at a rented store. She was lucky, others not so much. We spoke with the Better Business Bureau, who say they're keeping a close eye on the cyberbots, which experts say work the same as ticket bots.
They have multiple IP addresses that they're using so they can fool the programs. They have multiple credit card numbers that they use behind the scenes, and their bandwidth is higher.
Once they get the toys, they force consumers to pay exorbitant prices on independent websites. For example, a Barbie Hello Dreamhouse playset, which retails for $300, is in some cases being sold for $1,500. These fingerlings, which retail for $15, are going for close to $1,000, and the Super Nintendo NES Classic Edition, which sells for $80 retail, is going as high as secondary.
More and more people are stuff online. That's where they're running into the problem, because now it's not a matter of getting to the store as soon as it opens. Now you have to download it as soon as it's, it pops up on the website.
The BBB suggests if there is still a toy out there that you want, shop for it now in multiple locations. Don't wait any longer. They also suggest just making sure that you're working with a legit company, and you could research that on bbb.org. And finally, know the retail price so you're informed on whether you're getting ripped off or not.
Congress passed.
All right, folks. I do apologize for the echoing in there. I think after this weekend I'll have that fixed when I reset everything on that. But I had to laugh. I really did. Let me get that story. I really had to laugh about these Grinch bots. I saw this on the news this morning, One American News Network, and I'm like, what? I haven't heard of this before, right? And I didn't know, because I don't buy tickets online to concerts and stuff, so I didn't know they were doing the same thing to concert tickets. They call them online scalpers. But folks, whether it's a bot doing this or not, they still have to pay for it. The manufacturers are still making money. This is right or wrong. I'm just putting out the facts as they are. You make up your own mind whether you think this is right or wrong. There are folks out there, and we don't know who they are. They could be criminals. They could be terrorists. Maybe that needs to be investigated there too. Who see the, and this goes along with what I've always said for years now, that I think Christmas has been way too commercialized. I remember when my son was young and we went to get a Tickle Me Elmo, if you remember back that far. And I remember on the news, like Black Friday, there was like 100 parents heading back to the toy aisle to buy 50 Tickle Me Elmos. And it was like a combat zone back in there. It was ridiculous. And we ended up buying a Tickle Me Elmo. We couldn't get it for Christmas, so we bought one for his birthday. My son wasn't scarred because he didn't get the toy he wanted for Christmas. Because we always taught our children that Christmas is something more than just gift giving. Christmas is about an idea, the spirit of Christmas, of camaraderie, friends, family, sharing things, stuff like that. And it's not just about the present. The present, to me, is insignificant compared to the bonding that you do with friends and family during that time of year. And so these bots out there, these Grinch bots, are exploiting a mechanism in the free markets. They're buying these up because the demand for these are so high, and they're selling them, and the key word is selling. They're selling them at an inflated price because the people buying them are willing to pay that much for them. Now, who's the bad guy here? Who's the bad guy here? I would think it's, to me, I think it's stupid to tie all your Christmas present hopes on these toys, these hot toys of the season, because even when stores run out and they can't get them back in, people are still spending so much time and energy trying to find these. Oh, if my little boy or girl doesn't get this present, oh, it's going to be the end of Christmas forever. And they instill this type of ideology in their kids. And they stress themselves out over this. And again, what are these Grinch bots doing wrong? What are these people that are running these doing wrong? Unless they're a nefarious criminal organization, that's how they're making their money. I mean, that just popped into my head this morning when I was thinking about it. I said, boy, that'd be an easy way for organized crime or terrorists to actually raise cash, is with these Grinch bots or any of these type of bots. You know, it's a good way to launder your money, to buy them. You know, there's so much criminality that could actually go into it. I'm not sure who is behind that. Maybe they need to find that out, who's behind these things. But let's say there's nothing nefarious behind it. It's just groups of individuals doing this because they know these parents will pay any cost for these toys, a ridiculous cost for these toys, just to make their children happy and tie up their happiness in material goods. And to me, they're not stealing Christmas. Honestly, I think the parents that engage in this type of activity, that actually go out and pay $1,000 for a $20 item, there's something mentally wrong with them. I'm serious. There's something mentally wrong with them if they're doing that. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. You got to be kidding me, because it's to me it's ridiculous. It really is. I would never do that. Sorry. I'm too much of a miser. I like a good deal online and stuff like that, but I'm not going to bankrupt myself to buy a toy for my children. Just not going to happen. And even if you don't bankrupt yourself, was it really worth, those fingerlings or whatever they were? Was it really worth paying, 2,000-3,000 times more than what it was worth to bring happiness to your children? And usually, and folks, usually that happiness with toys is short-lived. Because next year it's on to something else. It's on to the next hottest toy next year. And we have boxes and boxes of toys that the kids don't play with anymore. So what are you really trying to teach your children? And are these are questions I'd love somebody to answer to me. Are these Grinch bots doing something nefarious? Or are they just participating in the free market? And they're even talking about, I guess the Congress has actually looked into this. Chucky Schumer's actually looking into this to try to outlaw that. First, I'd find out before you even try to start thinking about outlawing anything, to make sure whoever's behind these bots are, not criminal organizations or any terrorist organizations, anything like that. If they're just average, mom and pops out there trying to making a living off the internet, I think more power to them, because if people are willing to pay that price for them, why not? Why not? Why not capitalize on that? What stops this? These parents going and buying off these third-party sites just because. Well, I wanted it, can't find it. Here they are. My son or daughter needs to have this, so we'll pay a monstrously ridiculous price for it, and then they're happy. So if they just stop doing that, guess what? The Grinch bots will stop doing it too. And there is such thing. I've been on enough. I shop enough online when something new's coming out, especially books or something like that. But even toys, a lot of times these online realtors will let you pre-order, and that's something that's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. If you just go on a pre-order, and two, quit waiting until the last minute to buy your stuff. Because a lot of the stuff that they're selling at Christmas time has been on sale for quite a while in the department stores. You just don't know which one's the hot item yet. Again, I'm sorry. I think especially around this time of the year, pandering to your children and showing them all these bad examples of how to act when it comes to toys and stuff like that. I don't think it's doing our kids any favor whatsoever at all, at all. Last couple things in here that I have on the show today. One, there's Gateway Pundit reporting that Barack Obama blocked deportation of 550,000 illegal aliens. Basically what he did was he temporarily gave them amnesty until they could be brought up in the courts. Well, that number never stopped. And it's still building. And the immigration courts are so backed up it isn't funny. And a lot of this could have been alleviated if President Obama would have just put judges on the courts and had them go through and adjudicate these cases. But, you know, President Obama, in all his wisdom, not wanting to look bad to anybody, decided to give him temporary amnesty and just kick the can down the road, as it were, and put the problem in the next administration, which, if it would have been Hillary Clinton's administration, this would be a problem she'd have to deal with too. Of course, she'd do the Democratic thing and extend the amnesty and cause more of a backlog and more uncertainty. And this is one thing you have to think about too when it comes to Democrats and some Republicans. Do they live by an objective standard when it comes to things like immigration, the Constitution, stuff like that? Do they live by a objective standard? And finally, this is for my peeps over at Let America Vote, Common Cause, and Indivisible Guide. Breitbart's reporting, and they were called out on Twitter about this, but then Breitbart actually has video of the TV ads going on in Alabama pro Doug Jones. He's the Democrat running for the Senate seat in Alabama. A super PAC using voter intimidation tactics. Ads claim your vote is public record. So basically what they're doing is they're putting these ads out and saying your vote is public record and we'll know who you voted for. The public, your community, will know who you voted for. That's garbage. They will not. They do not. But how many people actually know that? How many people are that well informed about the voting process? They absolutely know that. And so, especially Let America Vote, I've been watching their Facebook and everything. They have not talked about this yet. I'm fixing after the show to post this over on their Facebook and ask their opinion about this. They're talking about voter intimidation in the form of voter ID, which that is not voter intimidation. They're lying through their teeth about that. And here we have actual, actionable voter intimidation going on as far as these ads are putting out absolute lies to the voters. And that's a form of intimidation, especially if you don't know any better. And I bet you these George Soros-backed groups won't say a thing about it. They absolutely will not say a thing about it. And to me, honestly, I don't even look at, I don't have TV, so I don't have to look at them. But I rarely look at political ads anymore because I go online and do my research. I'm not going to let one side tell me about the other. I'm going to go on and do some actual footwork on my computer instead of sitting there. And I can sit there and watch the football game, watch a football game or something else and do a little research on my laptop while I'm sitting there, you know, relaxing, stuff like that. It doesn't take a lot of work to do some research. So those are the last couple of things I just wanted to talk about there. So, but again, think about how you organize your life. Is it objective or is it subjective? And then just think, please, think about gender. Is it based on objective standards of sex, biological sex, or is it based on subjective feelings? And you have to answer that. You have to answer that question. And if you don't, then our society is going to start becoming totally subjective. We won't have any standards to live by. Therefore, we won't have a society to actually live in that, or at least it's fit to live in at all. It's been the Dan Clemens Show. I'm your host, Dan Clemens, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless. And we'll see you tomorrow at noon for Free for All Friday. And remember, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Leave a comment. Subscribe to the show if you're not subscribed already. Hit the notification button so when I have a new video out, you know it's out there. And please, by all means, if you can donate $1 a month, I would appreciate it. I have a Patreon and a PayPal account, so you can go over and do both of them. We'll see you tomorrow for Free for All Friday. Have a great rest of the day, folks.